So we talked a lot kind of in theory, what it is, how this is done. And like I mentioned, I think I've seen news stories on this. I think there's a bit of awareness out there. But let's talk a bit about what we've seen in our local market and how prevalent this attempted fraud really is. So this is probably a couple months ago. We got an order from, it was a property east of Columbus, which is a little far from where we are.
Licensed to do business there, but we don't do a whole
lot.
lot.
But we don't normally do it. What do you remember from us getting that order, and what red flags did you see kind of go off?
So for us, we do have an option for you to submit your orders through our website.
Yep.
Right? It's pretty rare for people that we do business with regularly to do that.
Yeah.
But they can. We got a order saying we want to do a closing through you guys. Can you facilitate it? Yada, yada, yada. They attached a copy of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, what you notice is your buyers in Ontario, Canada, I think it was, or
Yep.
Vancouver,
Yeah,
somewhere
in
in Canada.
Canada.
Your seller, that part was not really that confusing.
Right.
It seemed fine. It was, this property was being sold for over $1 million.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the exact number was. I think it was short of 2.
Yeah, it was like 1.9 or something, yeah.
Of course, we did our initial investigation, make sure that it's where everyone said it was. We're going through what's called an order entry process, where we set up the file, get a title examiner out there to examine the title of the property, and it just seems weird, right? The parties are, in their emails, they're using words that just a little odd.
Yep.
Right.
I remember looking at it, and everybody e-signed it, and the date format was the European date format. If we're gonna do July 4th, we do 7/4, whatever.
Right.
And they were gonna flip flop the date, the day and month. So
yeah, why do we do date format, month, date, year? It makes more sense, date, month, year, right? But whatever.
Why are we still on the mile? What is a
well,
kilometer?
that's true. 5,280 feet.
So these are all things that you talk to people that work in forgery or like currency forgery, right? They're gonna study the real thing to be able to detect that fraud as soon as you feel it. It's like, oh, the paperweight's off. This printing isn't right. It's not raised right on my finger. It's kind of the same thing. We have a lot of experience in our company, and things just don't add up, and you start asking more questions and digging a little deeper. The other thing too, it kind of cuts both ways. We're able to do some online investigation. I remember Googling the buyer, and I couldn't find anything about them being in Toronto or wherever they said they were. And I believe, and then I guess anything else you remember on that one that was
later that day.
Yeah.
After we had already caught it and said, yeah, we're not doing this.
Yep.
We got a notification from our underwriters.
Yep.
Remember, they have agents across the state, across the country so you've got your local boots on the ground, the local title company, and then you've got your underwriter who's got the big backing behind them, right? And they've got communication coming in from all their agents. And people had reached out across the state to get this transaction done.
And what they were trying to do is they were trying to pose as the seller who was, I believe, deceased.
Yeah, the seller ended up having been deceased like a year ago.
Yeah, and they were trying to sell it in his name, even though he was deceased. And they were basically trying to hit up any title company in Ohio.
It was dumb enough to do it.
Yep, and there's accuracy through volume, type of situation. So, it can seem like a good deal. Hey, this is cash or whatever they pose it as, but it's just some of those red flags that go off. And luckily our team is very experienced, and we were able to catch it before we sunk too many resources into it.
Right.
But definitely still out there. Another story that comes immediately to mind on this is just a Monday, we were talking to a realtor that we work with quite a bit, and she was mentioning there's attempts to sell vacant lots in a neighborhood around here that is around a lake.
Yeah, it's a highly regarded area.
Yeah.
And she just reached out to us and she said, I was contacted. Someone tried to get me to do it.
Yep.
Someone got someone else to do it. I believe she said they even got under contract before they really sniffed us out. They said, this isn't legit.
Yep. Because this in this case is vacant land, and they're once again trying to pose as the owner to sell it. Obviously no one's going to live on vacant land, I guess, unless you're living in a tent. But that's one that seems easy. They were listing it for well below what the market would dictate for a piece of land in that area as well.
Yeah. And I would say that's not across the board. Sometimes,
sure.
like the
Sometimes
other one we were talking about,
that was market. Yeah.
that was pretty well market value.
Yeah.
I mean, it was we're talking north of $1 million, and it was a nice property.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it wasn't a palatial estate necessarily. So don't just go based on the low market value, but that is one of those flags in your tool of red flags. And then you've got other tools, like they don't want to talk to you on the phone.
Yep.
Right? Don't get me wrong. I don't love talking to people on the phone too sometimes. But when someone asks you to call them and they say no, I don't call.
Yeah.
I only know like one person that's legit that does that. I called him one time and he said, "Don't call me, text me," and hung up on me.
Yeah.
But so he's in a little bit of an oddball. But most people will talk to you on the phone. They don't maybe love it, but that's another one. The correspondence, they're always out of town, right? They can't meet with you. They're going to make up every excuse under the sun, not to meet with you, not to talk with you on the phone. It's all over the board what they'll do, right? It's almost like a kid lying to their parents. They probably got to go to one, but they'll make up anything under the sun to try to stay away from the exact truth, right? So that's another one you've got there.
I mean, so the interesting thing about this case, though, so this realtor that we work with commonly, they were able to basically figure out it was fraudulent, and they canceled the transaction. And then within a couple days, it was listed again, or another property in that community with a different realtor. And she, luckily, was proactive, reached out and said, hey, this is fraudulent. And I think they did it 3 or 4 different times, and she was calling different realtors every time. Similar to what we would say, and they were reaching out to title companies. In this case, they're reaching out to just different realtors to get it listed on the MLS and make it appear more legitimate because it's listed with a realtor.
Right. And don't get me wrong. So when we get it in our hands, just like realtors, we have a network, right?
Yep.
We have people that we know to contact. Our underwriters, of course, the best resource because there's 4 major title insurance underwriters in the nation. There are more, but there's 4 major ones. And if you reach out to your underwriter, they're going to put out a bulletin to all their agents to say, be careful on this transaction, on this property, whatever, we believe it's fraudulent.
Yep.
Contact your underwriter for more information. As a realtor, you have that as well. I mean, you're a realtor of a brokerage. You can reach out to your broker and just put the red flag in the air.
Yep.
And you're friends with all these realtors. Yeah. Are you a little bit of competitors? Sure. But at the end of the day, you're competing with them, not against them, right? Because a realtor gets tied up in a fraud scam. I don't know that they've necessarily got any liability, right? But it's not a good look to begin with. So that they all want to have safe and secure transactions because I believe almost every realtor out there is really in it for their client. Sure. Do they want to get paid? Yes. They still have to put food on the table as well, but they're in it for their client. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do the weekend or the late night hours if they were just in it for the money.
Right. Yeah.
So look out for those red flags, I would say.
And what are some other resources like realtors or people that, think you do this long enough, red flags start going off. What else could people do so they're not wasting their time? Because at the end of the day, if you're going back and forth with these people, putting it on MLS, like you're wasting your time you could be spending on other clients.
You know what I'd do? I'd figure out if it's an owner that I might know.
Yep.
And reach out to them and just say, hey, at an independently verified location, right? Don't just go based on the email that that you got in the email soliciting you, but independently verified. Honestly, a lot of properties, if they're going after these things that are not mortgaged for the most part,
right.
I mean, some of them are. The tax billing address is on the auditor's site in Ohio, where the tax bill goes. Send a letter to the tax billing address. Yeah, maybe they're smart enough to redirect their mail. I maybe, but I doubt it. They're probably not doing that extra work.
Yep.
So send a letter saying, hey, just verifying this is an accurate solicitation, because by the time the mail gets there and they call you and say, hey, call me at 555-1234, you probably have not closed on this transaction. I know the mail is not the fastest thing in the world, but it does eventually get there. So that's another option.
Looking on the auditor's site, doing a little investigation.
Due diligence. Search for obituaries. Just Google John Smith obituary, Claremont County, Ohio. Right? And see if your person's died. Right? Because they are going after a lot of estates. Because, well, the person that lives there doesn't live there anymore. Right? And the kids probably don't live there. You might have like a surviving spouse or something like that. Google obituaries. Just, I don't want to say assume everything's fraudulent, because the vast majority of them are not.
Right.
But I did have an attorney that had a wonderful piece of advice to me.
Okay.
And I won't name him because, he'd probably love it. But he said, when in doubt, lie to them. If you lie to them and they are the legit person, they'll verify.
They'll correct you, right?
I see you bought this property in 2002. Well, no, I haven't owned it that long. I bought it in 2012. Cool. Just checking. Just checking. I see you bought this property in 2002. Oh, yeah, we bought it back in 2002. No, you didn't.
So
we're done here.
So that's your legal advice, is to
lie to your
to
clients.
them.
Lie to your clients. Why wouldn't you? Right?
Perfect.
Wait, this is not legal advice. You'll see the disclaimer somewhere. This is not legal advice. It's educational and informational. But think about it.
There's just another way to dig in just a little bit and ask a question. That's a fair question, but you're testing them a little bit. Like we said, not doing this on every transaction, but just ensuring if some of these red flags are going off in your mind just based off experience, like it's something, a tool someone could use.
I mean, think about it. When you sign into your free credit report, whatever, they ask you what's called out of wallet questions. Right. What street did you grow up on? Where did you have a car loan at? Stuff like that. And they'll give you multiple options. So they're kind of lying to you. Right. They're giving you 3 options that were wrong and one that's hopefully right.
Some cases, all of them are wrong.
Sometimes they're all wrong. Right. None of the above, right? So it's a similar form of that.
True.
Right. You're doing it you're not intending to defraud them when you do that. You're intending to verify they're not defrauding you.
I mean, to kind of bring this back home, this is a growing issue in the industry as a whole, right? I think this kind of points back to the partnership that title, that realtors, can have in this. Not necessarily lenders in this form of fraud, but it's really a partnership and working with each other. These people are, going after people's most valuable assets, their high value items, like you said, and they might try 100, but they get one to work. That's all they need. So I think we're seeing increased volume of the attempts of fraud like this, and it's in our local market. And from news stories and things that you're able to Google, or seeing more and more across the country as well. So I foresee this only increasing. And as we get better at detecting, probably it's going to morph into different ways that we can't imagine right now, just because they tend to find a way. But I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts on that?
Short
Sure.
one, which is there's another type of deed fraud that is, in my experience, not as rampant, but it exists and it's out there, which is it's a different type of seller impersonation fraud where the property is owned by an LLC or
another
corporation,
entity,
something like that. Remember, a lot of people will create an LLC to put one property in for their investment property, and they'll create another one for their next investment property, and they don't really have. It's not like a continuing business, and their records they're just junk. They don't keep great records. They basically treat it sometimes as an extension of themselves. They don't have a bank account set up for the LLC, that type of stuff. Don't have operating agreements, et cetera. They're filed at the state. They're a valid LLC. But remember, that information is public record. You can search for any LLC under the sun as long as you know the name of it and where it's filed. So, I mean, we had one several years ago at this point where they were a buyer And I don't know what they were trying to eventually get, but fortunately you get that gut feeling, right? At the end of the day, you find out that your gut feelings are usually right, and there's psychology behind it. It's the fight or flight response, right? Your body rationalizes this isn't right before you can rationalize why it's not right, right? So trust your gut feelings. And this guy, he was incorporated in Michigan, and then he sends us over an operating agreement that's in Indiana, and then he tries to explain, well, I transferred it to Michigan, which is it's not a significantly hard process, but people don't usually do it, right? And then, of course, the money, he's like, I sent my wire. The money never arrives. And I don't know what he was, in the end, trying to get to. Fortunately, we just said, this needs to make sense, or we're not doing it. Right? And he stopped contacting us, and the seller ended up selling to someone else, I'm sure. But he had solicited an agent that they didn't know him beforehand. So I do recommend the agents at least pull some of the information, get your driver's license of your parties. Check it for, like, the font changes. People who are, check it for, like, it being an old ID. You can usually find the current ID format online.
If it's out of state or something
whatever.
like that.
Like an Ohio one, you'll probably be able to notice, right? If you're an Ohio resident. Kentucky, same thing. But if it's out of state, passports, out of country, you can usually get the format. And you can see, is that font a little bit different? Is the picture just a little bit too good or a little bit too bad? Right? Those types of things. They actually look good in their driver's license picture, because I don't know many people that do, those types of things. And then if you've got a seller that's an LLC or a trust or a power of attorney, ask for those documents ahead of time. You're their agent, remember. You're either their agent or you're potentially the buyer, and you need to verify that it's them, or make sure the title company has verified that it's them. You get a lot of LLCs that are owned by a trust, that are owned by an LLC, that are owned by a trust, and they do this layering for limited liability. And at the end of the day, you got to find someone that really has the authority to do what they're trying to do.
Makes sense. I mean, so like we said, I mean, definitely an issue in the industry. We foresee it continuing, probably changing slightly as we get better at detecting this type of fraud. But unfortunately for homeowners that are listening to this, protecting yourself. There's those free alerts that we talked about. Once again, those are if you're listening in Southwest Ohio, we have a link to our website in the show notes where you can sign up for those via the auditor's site. But knowledge is power, and understanding what's happening as quickly as possible with these alerts would do, and then who to reach out to start remediation. So just to wrap this up, if this happens to somebody, what is like the first thing that they should do? Like, what are their next steps?
File a report. That way, even if the police don't do anything, you have a police report, right? Do a little bit of investigation yourself, but don't delay too much on hiring an attorney. Call the attorney general, of your state. That they are there to protect consumers. That is part of the attorney general's job, right, is to protect consumers. They issue bulletins all the time on these deed fraud alerts. You probably end up hiring an attorney, file a lawsuit, prove that it wasn't you that signed the deed. Maybe you were out of town when that happened, and you've got flight records to prove that you were out of town, or the notary was not actually a real notary, that type of stuff. You then usually have to submit evidence, make all your motions, filings, do all that fun stuff, and then eventually get a ruling from the court, and that gets filed at the county. So, and it basically says, cancel this transaction. This didn't happen, right? There was a story relatively recently in Dayton where that happened, and this is what the lady did. She found out that she thought that her property had been transferred out of her name. She contacted the police. She went through that process that I kind of outlined a little bit, and your facts may differ, right? But that's the general process. And she ended up getting a court ruling that said this transaction never happened. I'm not going to guarantee that's going to happen in your case. It's very fact dependent. The law doesn't really change that much, but the facts are very much changing in every case. And then that's pretty much it. Contact your attorney general. People kind of fail to recognize they're out there, and that's kind of the big bastion of what they do. They are the attorney for the state. The state is the government that represents the people. The worst they can do is say we don't handle it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't cost any money to file a report with the Attorney General. It doesn't cost any money or much money to file a police report.
Yeah.
Right. And then talk to someone you trust.
Yeah.
And
I mean, in general, you're going to need people to help you remediate this issue.
Right.
But reaching out as quickly as possible can help the issue resolve, hopefully quicker than if it's 6 months, years, later that this is discovered.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
Cool. Well, Trey, thanks for helping us dive into this. Obviously, top of mind for a lot of people. Hopefully, this is a value to homeowners and realtors that might be seeing an increase in these attempts and people reaching out to them. So,
Absolutely.
Great.
Good luck out there, guys.
Yeah. Good luck. Thanks for listening.
Call us if you need to.
See ya.
All information provided in this publication is for informational and educational purposes only, and in no way is any of this content contained herein to be construed as financial, investment, or legal advice or instruction. TechneTitle Agency, Inc. and the guests appearing on this podcast do not guarantee the quality, accuracy, completeness, or timelines of the information in this publication. While efforts are made to verify the information provided, the information should not be assumed to be error-free. Some information in this publication may have been provided by third parties and has not necessarily been verified by TechneTitle Agency, Inc. TechneTitle Agency, Inc., its affiliates, and subsidiaries do not assume any liability for the information contained herein, be it direct, indirect, consequential, special, or exemplary, or other damages whatsoever, however caused, arising out of or in connection with the use of this publication or in reliance on the information, including any personal or pecuniary loss, whether the action is contract, tort, including negligence, or other tortious action.